Hello again. Day 18 of our challenge. My space looks a little different because of what we're doing today. We are going to do the king and queen of the yoga poses, which is headstand and shoulder stand. Some of you already have this in your practice, but it's always good to review the basics of these poses. And I'm going to offer some modifications as well as proper setup and ways you can help enhance the posture. Even if you're still already pretty proficient at it, you can start to remember these actions that can make the posture stronger and better aligned. And so we're going to go into just two poses today, but pretty in depth. And what you will need is a wall, which is why I'm here. 3 blocks, if you have 3 blocks. You can get by with 2 blocks and maybe a book or something thick like a block. And then 3 or 4 blankets. And if you don't own blankets, they're pretty cheap online. They're just called Mexican blankets. And they're really good to have for your practice. Also a strap. So those are the things we're going to use today. And we're just going to begin by talking about headstand first. And we're going to go over, before we begin work on that pose, just kind of finding the true crown of the head, which is where we want to be weight bearing. And so it's one way you can say it is it's the highest crest of your head, if you can find that right now. I find that instruction a little bit less clear than this one, which is to take your thumbs to your ears, and then where the middle fingers connect for most of us is the true crown of the head. So this is where we're trying to put the weight down. If you're more forward than that, you can distort the neck, and if you're more back than that, you can also distort the neck. So we always want to take care of the neck. That being said, if you have any neck injuries, you can modify this posture or skip it, but you don't want to do the full pose. And I'll show you how you can support yourself doing a modification in a little bit. Another thing to say about both of these poses is they're best to, well, A, practice every time you practice, and B, to skip and modify with something else or substitute if you're on your cycle or you have some sort of dizziness or something wrong with your eyes. There's a few hyper or contraindicated things, and those are the main ones. Otherwise, it's a great pose to put in every practice. Actually, the inspiration for this class came from one of the participants who asked about where she should be putting these 2 poses as far as her home practice with these 30-minute practices I've been sending you. So the answer to that is the pose we're about to do, headstand, is best placed early in your practice before you get too tired. You need the energy and stamina to hold yourself up there. The second pose, shoulder stand, is best placed right before Shavasana. So that's the pose you use, although it does take effort, to start to kind of pull the senses away from the outer world and to quiet down and to downregulate the nervous system. So that's the answer to that. So if you're plugging these in with our 30-day challenge classes, headstand maybe before you do your practice, before you do the 30-minute, shoulder stand maybe right after Shavasana, then you can do another Shavasana after that, is probably the best answer for those 30-minute classes. So let's get going. We found the true crown of the head. The next thing we're going to talk about is the arm position. It's an interlocked hand position to the back of the head. Your crown, of course, will be on the floor because we're going upside down. And then the arms are elbows are going to only be as wide as shoulders. So you don't want elbows way out here. You want elbows as wide as shoulders. And then notice how you lift the elbows. And when you're upside down, that means you're getting the elbows into the floor more. It brings your shoulder blades into your back. That's a really important function of good structural integrity to the pose. So to move the elbows into the floor is a great kind of place to focus on in your pose. So that being said, before we get into that pose, we're going to do a few building block pieces. Set up at a wall, and you'll come into downward facing dog, facing away from the wall, and raise a leg as high as you can and pressing the heel to the wall. So you want both legs straight, and you want to really feel like your heel is reaching to the wall and your heel nearest the floor is reaching to the floor, and your hips aren't turning. So you're keeping the hips really squared up, and you're taking the shoulder blades into the back. So this is a great way to prepare the body for headstand. Shirshasana. Other leg. Really extending the leg fully, both legs fully, reaching the heels toward the floor and wall, taking the shoulder blades in. Good. And then go ahead and step down. If you need a rest, make sure to take one in child's pose, a couple breaths. Now you can turn and face the wall. The next pose we're going to do, we're not going upside down yet, is Dolphin Pose. So this is done on the forearms. We're not going to go into that interlocked hand position yet. So your wrists should be in line with your elbows. Your inner wrists are pressing into the floor. And you're going to start in your knee down position right under the hips. Just like you're in down dog, but down on the forearms. And just start to walk in. Keep the shoulder blades moving in. And take the knees down and sit back for child's pose. So we're just kind of running through these building block poses. We would spend more time on them if we were going to, well, if we had more time. So when you're at home working on this pose, just know that you can spend as much time as you need on all of these little building block pieces. So that was Dolphin. We're going to do Dolphin again. We're just going to try to walk in a little bit more, and we're going to connect the hands now with the piece of the headstand piece, so the actual arm work of the pose. So the idea is to interlock your hands. Your elbows are only as wide as your shoulders, and your head fits down right to the floor so that your hands, your palms are really gripping the back of your head. And then lift the knees and walk yourself in. And then try taking one leg up. And then after you've made those attempts taking your leg up, sit back and just take a few moments in child's pose. Okay, so we're gonna get set up for the inversion. That being said, you don't need to come up, of course, especially if you are somebody that's dealing with a cervical spine injury. You're gonna wait to hear those modifications. But you should be able to do all the work we've done up until now pretty safely, because you're not putting the full weight of your upside down body on your head and neck. So I like to set up with a blanket, because when you do come into the full inversion, the head against the floor, especially if you have more ridge in the crown of the head, not comfortable. So you want to make sure you're comfortable. You'll come back to your interlocked position. You see how the wrist the outer wrist falls wider than the inner wrist? Do your best to rotate the inner wrist above the outer wrist. I think I said that backwards, but you want your wrist to stack. So that's going to give you more of a stable base. So you want your inner wrist above your outer wrist. Place the head, walk yourself in, and then maybe kick a leg up or take a leg up. So I'm going to come down. So I've done it for so long, maybe it looked easy, or maybe you come up differently if you already come into this pose. Eventually you want to come up with as much control as you can. But as we learn, it's okay to kick up. The wall will catch you. So there's no problem with that. I'll try to show that. Let's do little hops here. You get a little momentum, and then just kick. And you can let your body hang out on the wall, or you might be able to come off the wall a little bit. And then remember that elbow action, really driving the elbows into the floor. Moving the shoulder blades into the chest. Taking the tailbone into the body. Lifting with your legs.
Okay, and then again, you want to come down with control. That being said, you might drop down. It might take time to learn that control. So you can come down one leg at a time, or you might be able to come down by bending your knees and then tucking your knees in. So however you get down, eventually we try to just control that momentum a little bit more. And that comes over time. Okay, so once you're down, make sure to take some time in child's pose. Okay, before we move on to the alternate poses, if you're just not going to do Shirshasana, I want to show you one way you can modify Shirshasana if you're having trouble with it. That's where the 3 block setup comes in. And I'm actually going to take this blanket away because I want traction, but another way to kind of imitate what the blanket was doing is to just double up the mat so you have a little more thickness, but then you still have that stickiness. So we all have different proportions. So play with the blocks and play with the height so that the way you set it up will fit you, so that the top block is going to run across your shoulder blade line, because that's where we tend to round. So this block is going to prevent us. It's going to keep the shoulder blades moving in. So sometimes I need a little bit of an angle on these blocks here because I want my hands to fit in to that little hollow there that you probably can't see, but that's where I want my hands to fit in. So you have to get a little creative with your blocks to make it really work for your pose. So my angle needs to be wider. Okay, so then I'm going to show you this beautiful support. There it is against my shoulder blades. And then I go up. And once I'm up there, it's keeping my shoulder blades exactly where they go. It's really helpful. So sometimes when you can't do this pose, oftentimes because of that rounding in the upper back that we really, really need to correct, this might help you get up. And even if you can't get up for a while, this might help you in the dolphin pose right here, okay? And you can play with the legs coming up individually and using that block to really train the body to move in from the back body to the front body. And I've seen versions of this setup that are very weird. So if it's not hitting you right, just kind of get creative. Hopefully you have some things at home you can try. Like this is where the book might come in handy. If you don't have 3 blocks, you could try a book that's maybe not as thick as this. So just get creative with it. It really does feel nice to have that support. So before we come away from the king of all the yoga poses, headstand, if you just can't do it momentarily or just forever because of some neck injury, there's lots of ways you can get around it. If I had my ropes hanging, a lot of people do the hanging version where there's no weight on the head and you're hanging, and it's beautiful and it's really lovely. So maybe that's an option for you. But most of us don't have ropes at home, hanging ropes. So what you can do is do another pose, which we're going to do head supported. I'm going to show you 2. So the idea being that when the crown of the head is supported, we get a lot of the benefit. Even if we're not doing a full inversion or an inversion at all, you can do a standing forward bend with head support. Not today, I'm not getting that low. So then you're going to build up the height. Okay. This is a lovely alternative. Crown of the head supported. Okay, another version is wide standing forward bend with head support. Okay. There is one other version that I could show you, but I don't have the second chair. There's another version you can do
with 2 chairs. So if you're interested in that one, you can reach out to me. That is more like the true inversion, but there's 0 weight on the head. So I can show you that separately. I didn't plan time for that one to show you today, but I'd be happy to show you if you're interested. All right. So we're going to move on to Sarvangasana, which is the shoulder stand. Shoulder stand is really just an extension of the bridge pose, which most of us have done before. So just to review that, come onto your back, walk your feet in, and lift your hips. Because our legs aren't overhead in bridge pose, we don't need tons of support under the shoulders. But once the body goes into a vertical plane, you can see how severe that would be for the cervical spine, for your neck, which is why we do a lot of blanket support for the shoulder stand pose. I'm going to roll to my side. This is considered the queen of all the yoga poses. It's very soothing to the nervous system. It is demanding though at the same time. I still always use a strap for my arms. Some people graduate from the strap, they no longer need it. Some people hate it from the very beginning. So you have to kind of play with it to find out if it works for you or not. But the size of the strap really depends on the circumference of your shoulders. So you're gonna find a strap, make a loop, put it right above your elbows. And if you see your arms looking pretty much parallel, then you have your perfect size. So if you don't see that, just make sure to fit it to your own dimensions so you have that perfect size. I leave it on my non-dominant arm because when I need to get it underneath me to the good arm, I'm going to use my dominant hand to do that. But for now, just put that loop aside. We're going to talk about the setup. Again, we're going to use the wall to help us today. So you're going to find your blankets, and you want the dimensions of the blankets. I would say that's about 2 feet by 2.5 feet, 2 feet by 3 feet. To really cover the surface area that we need, which is the shoulders and some of the upper body. And just like everything, you need to kind of work with your height for blankets as far as how many. I recommend starting with more. I understand that we don't have a ton of blankets at home sometimes, so it's best that it's not like a quilt. We want it to be firm. It's not going to squish down on you as soon as you're on it. So I'm using 4. It's a little excessive for me. I'd be fine with 3, but I feel more like it's more luxurious when I have all this height. Okay, so that's a good setup for me. It's close to the wall. There's going to be a block in place that's going to help you get up and down in the pose, especially when you're not using the wall for support. And then you're going to grab that strap that you set up for yourself. Put that on your non-dominant arm. And then lie down on your blanket stack. And your sacrum and tailbone should be getting that kind of block support. And hopefully you can see, but I'm leaving about 1 inch of room from where my shoulder is to the end of the blankets, because when I come up, my shoulders will move back. What I don't want is my shoulders to fall off. So I'm leaving enough room that I stay on the blanket edge. Hopefully you can tell I've set up the blankets neatly. I don't have a sloppy blanket pile. It's hopefully one straight edge. Actually, I could have made that neater, but that's fine. Okay, so once I have my strap on my arm, I'm going to use the wall to lift my hips. This is where I take my arm underneath me and I put it into the loop, and I kind of wiggling here to help get my shoulders right on the edge and to help to get my pants up, but also to help to get my arms underneath me. I'm going to take hold of my lower back and try to crawl my hands towards the dorsal spine between the shoulder blades. And then the legs can come up. So one thing that you want to avoid once your legs are up is you don't want to look to either side or move your head. Like, you can move your eyeballs, of course, but try not to look to your side. It's just not that safe for the neck. So keep looking straight up, not off to the side, not rolling the head.
And the hands are again supporting the same area in the upper back. So keep crawling the hands towards that area, which is why the strap is so nice. Because otherwise you really have to work for that a lot harder. Lift your legs. Try to put your heels, hips, and shoulders all on a line. And by the way, with both of these poses, you want to build, you have to kind of condition. So you might start a minute. Eventually you want to work to 5 or 10 minutes in these poses. So just be there as long as you can. The thing to know is when you've come down, your body's come down, and maybe you were disappointed you wanted to be up there longer, just stay down. Because these poses are so, they're so specific. And if we give our second effort, it's not usually the best effort. We're usually tired, and the pose won't be any better. So if you end up coming down, just stay down, and I'll show you where we go from there. But if you're up here for a while, you could start to play with the legs coming down one at a time. And oftentimes I only just take them halfway down. And then I bring them up. This is Ekapada, where we take one leg at a time. And there's lots of variations to shoulder stand and headstand. We don't really start to do them until we've mastered the basic poses. Okay, so to come down, we're going to start by just taking the feet to the wall. Help your strap off of your arms, one arm. Walk your spine down slowly. That block underneath you will be waiting for you. And then to rest, it's really lovely. Shift off of the blankets until your shoulders and head are on the floor. Cross your legs or put your feet together, bound angle. Unfold your arms. Really soothing for the back after shoulder stand. Really just lovely to release the efforts of that pose. And so maybe you didn't find the quietness in the pose, because like I said, it's a lot of effort. But you do find the quietness following. Very peaceful, which is why we place it close to Shavasana. So you want to stay there just a few moments. And then roll to your side. You can use the wall for the rest of your life to help you get in this pose. But I wanted to show you without the wall, just so you know that that's also an option. And so we want to work with that neat side of the blankets, which is why I'm going to flip the whole thing, because I want it to be where my shoulders will be. The block is going to be helpful again. Okay, so this time we won't have the wall to help us get up. So put yourself back together again, setting up the pose. Make sure your shoulders have a little room once we get up, but they're still going to be on that stack. And then we need to kind of lift our legs. And you can either bring them to the wall if it's still there for you. Like I said, we weren't going to use it, but it can be a nice way to stop the feet from going all the way to the floor. You're going to get your strap back on your arms. I'm not doing a very good demo. I'm sorry. There, get it back on your arms. Get the shoulders underneath you. And then take the legs up. So I obviously didn't move myself away from the wall enough that it was still there for my feet. That wasn't the intention. So my feet were, imagine they were on the floor. And so you'd be coming up from what is called plow pose. where the feet are above the head. And for a lot of people, that's hard on the back. So you can place a chair there and just have the chair be a resting point for your feet. Some of you are flexible enough that you could take your feet all the way to the floor. So plow pose has always been really hard for me, but this is it. And what I wanted to show you is that to get out of the pose, you come back to plow pose, remove your strap, reach your arms up towards your feet. Use your arms and your upper body as an anchor, and then start to control that descent out of the pose slowly. And again, momentum might catch up with you and you might just come crashing down, but eventually you learn to slow it. And then the same counter pose, not really pose, but the same resting position, the shoulders and head come down. The lower back is really soothed by the height of the blankets. You feel that rush of, if you can say that, that rush of calm, the residue. So it is recommended, if it's not contraindicated for you, to do these two poses every time you practice. And you'll start to really learn to love them. I used to dread them, as I know many people do. When the teacher would say it's time for Shirshasana, I would freeze and panic. And now it's really lovely. So I hope that you can start to befriend these poses, find building blocks to make them more accessible to you. Reach out to me for those building blocks if you're finding more stumbling blocks. I'm happy to help because I really would love you to incorporate these poses into your life. So the modifications, which we saved a little bit of time for shoulder stand. You can join the knees, roll off to your side. We can do a pose that's essentially shoulder stand, but without inverting the legs. So we get the chin lock, which is what happens in shoulder stand. We get the chin and chest closed in together. But we don't have to invert the legs. So if you're on your cycle, the reason we don't go upside down on our cycle is because we invert the flow, and a lot of times it stops the cycle in your tracks, and it's very uncomfortable, and you wish you hadn't done that. So you're going to set up C2 Bandha Sarvangasana. Don't need the wall, but it's there, so we'll just go ahead and use it. You can use this loop around your legs, which will keep your legs tight. You're just gonna cinch them together anywhere between the knees and hips. Your two blocks will match whatever height you choose. I know I'm a medium or tall person, so today I'm going to show you medium. I'm going to start with my butt on the floor. Make sure my head and shoulders are both on the blanket. Once I'm down on the floor, then you can place whatever tier or block you're using under your sacrum. Your heels will come onto your foot block. And then you're going to try to really get your shoulders down, your chest lifted, your shoulder blades lifting toward the chest. You're in the backs of your hands. Your gaze is pointed toward your cheeks. And so not as much support needed for the cervical spine because of course the legs aren't inverted. But the blanket is there for comfort, so it's there for cushion, which is why we want the head and the shoulders to have the same amount so that it's even. I'm doing a little effort with my legs. Every time I breathe in, I'm just kind of feeling my chest rising. Every time I exhale, I'm snuggling my chin to my chest. My tailbone is curling up toward the ceiling. So still water's running deep. There's a lot going on, but this is a stilling, quieting pose. And you don't rush these poses, but I want to just point out one last option, which is very, very passive, which is legs up the wall. So you'll step down, help yourself out of your contraction.
wall pose is best done with the wall, but sometimes we don't have that option. You can float the legs overhead, freestanding, but it does require more effort, which makes it a little less quieting. So if you have a wall, I recommend using it blanket or bolster to the wall. You'll come in kind of sitting sideways to help you swing your legs up, your torso down. Try to get your butt as close to the wall as you can. And you might find you like more height. So again, it's one of those things you learn to kind of know your own prop setup for, what feels really good in your body. And we'll all finish here. This is a perfectly fine pose to spend your time in Shavasana in. Same for when you left shoulder stand and you were resting your back on the blankets. Sometimes people just stay there because they're so at peace. It would be disruptive to transition. So wherever you can integrate this practice, maybe legs up the wall, maybe you're in classical Shavasana position. As long as you're kind of cultivating and protecting what you've cultivated with your practice, you're in a good place, as long as you're passive in your body. Feel free to stay. I'm going to close us for the day here. You can fold your legs in, roll to your side. Always roll to your side once you've been reclining for a while to come up. Don't just shoot right up. Just take a moment to sit tall. Be quiet, close your eyes. Let your hands be restful, either sealed together in front of the heart or just restful on the legs or lap. And namaste.